words of my mouth. Do not forsake her, and she will preserve you. Love her, and she will keep you. Personification, basically giving human characteristics to wisdom. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom in all you're getting, get understanding. All right, let's turn to Proverbs chapter 20. Proverbs chapter 20. Last week, we looked at 3 questions. What is implied in that chapter 4, the responsibility of a father? What do verses 3 suggest as to why parents teach and guide as children as they do? And what one thing stands out as such is the supreme importance that it should not be missed. When I was my father's son, tender and the only one in the sight of my mother, he also taught me and said, let your heart retain my words, keep my commandments, and live, right? We've seen that through those 7 verses. One of the principal aspects of this is the pursuit, is what I would call it, right? It's not just a matter of knowing that it's around, but the pursuit of wisdom and understanding, right? It sounds like David was telling his son Solomon, and Solomon is telling his children to pursue this wisdom, pursue this understanding, and to pursue it much like you would, and cherish it much like you would a physical relationship. That's one of the main things that I want to carry over into today's class is the pursuit, right? The knowledge, the wisdom, the understanding is there. Jesus said, you shall know the truth shall set you free. We have to pursue it though, right? We have access to it, but we have to actively pursue it. All right, Proverbs chapter 20. This chapter, 30 verses. We don't have time to read the whole thing. It starts off with some very poignant and critical scriptures for other purposes, other instructional purposes. We won't dive in. We'll look at 11. Even a child is known by his deeds, by whether what he does is pure and right. The hearing and the seeing eye, the Lord has made both of them. One more time. Even a child is known by his deeds, by whether what he does is pure and right. All right. We are going to read one cross-reference verse, which is going to come from Matthew. So just keep your finger on Proverbs and put your finger to Matthew 7, verse 16. Matthew 7, verse 16. And we're just going to tie these 2 together. There's 2 questions we're going to focus on today. First one is, by what is a child known? Is that a fair measurement? By what is a child known? Is that a fair measurement? And then the second question is, what relationship, if any, does the principle set forth by Jesus in Matthew 7:16 have with this passage? Now, Matthew 7:15 and 16 says, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown in the fire. Therefore, by their fruits, you will know them. All right, we're going to compare and contrast just for context that Matthew chapter 7 is not specifically talking about parenting children, young adults, teens, or child-parent relationship. But we're going to see where the conversation takes us. Okay, first is, by what is a child known? Is that a fair measurement, right? This chapter 20 of Proverbs says, even a child is known by his or her deeds, by whether what he does is pure and right, right? Any child, Proverbs is saying, is known by their deeds, right? By what they do, whether it's good, pure, and right. And the contrast of inference to this verse is whether it's not, right? What is that saying? Basically, you are what you do is just a short kind of vernacular way to say it. And our question for today is that a fair measurement, right? You are what you do. Is that a fair measurement? Right now, as an adult, let's go in reverse order before we go to a child. And keep in mind for the next several Sundays, when we say child, we're not talking about just a baby, right? You're just saying any aspect of you having a mother and a father, right? You can be an adult, you still are your parent's child, even though you may not want to be viewed that way. Although I would argue once you crack probably 30, you probably like to be referred to as a child, because that may be the only instance in your physical life somebody referred to you as that younger state. But usually when you get a teenager into your 20s, you don't want to be viewed as a child anymore, right? But you're still your parent's child. That's just how that level of intimacy is still there. So that's what we're talking about today. Okay, let's look at this to see what we have in terms of what you're known by. Before we go to the child-parent relationship and what you're known by as a child, let's look at it from an adult standpoint, and we'll make it clear in a second why we're starting there. Before we go to a child, let's look at it as an adult. That's how we'll get to question number 5, right? Is an adult known by what he or she does, their deeds? Does their reputation precede them? Yeah. Right? Like, just think of this conceptually before we think of it from a child standpoint, right? Is an adult known by his or her deeds? Do their actions dictate their characteristics or their reputation, right? Do their actions dictate the characteristics of their reputation? So you are asking, like, the things that you say and do that people witness, outside of Ecclesiastes telling us that the whole duty of man is to fear God and keep his commandments, and we have to give an account, outside of Jesus saying everything that comes out of a person's mouth, every idle word will be judged. Outside of that, right, from a spiritual standpoint, just in the world, is it true that what you say and do that's received by people around you, does that attribute to the perception of your character, right? Does someone grab hold of those things either they hear or they see that come from you, and do they attribute that to your character, right? Outside of preconceived notions, prejudices, biases, right? All those sort of things, just in a normal context, especially thinking a work setting, right? Because before somebody even gets to interview on you on a one-on-one, there has to be some list of experiences, and some jobs ask you to give 2, 3 or more references so that they can assess your character, meaning what you did at your previous job will impact how they feel about giving you this current job, what you did at your previous job. Now, tying this in back to children, what you did at your previous role, right? Your previous role as a child, let's say up to teenage years. What if in life, people assessed what you did in your previous role as you went into the next stage of life? Well, it's not necessarily one-to-one that way in the home, but it is that way in some regards, because think of college admission. When you go into a college admission program, some colleges ask to interview you. Some colleges ask to interview your teachers or your parents or legal guardian, and they want to know some character things about you before they let you into their school. Now, some people, what does that have to do with scholastics, right? Like, why can't I just present my SATs and present my transcripts from high school? Because some colleges, that's not enough. So what you did in high school, your previous role, will dictate where you're moving on towards college, right? But what if it was a step further? What if in life, period, when you got past your 18s, right, to your 29, what if that section of life was based off of your previous role? What previous role? Your previous role as a child in your parents' house, right? What if that was the graduation step, so to speak? Well, in life, parents are trying to assist their kids to get to the next stage of life. But when we get in the weeds of family dynamics, it's not always received that way, right? Like, the child is not always receiving the instructions or the structure of the home as a conduit to get you to the next stage of life, right? And that's grossly unfortunate, right? If children looked at it more so as training, right? Because when you're in a workspace, I'm not so combative to my management because I know they're training me, especially when they tell me in advance, hey, Ellis, we're training you for an upper management position. So when they start critiquing me on my attendance and things like that, I'm not as upset because I know the trajectory they're trying to get me to in 2, 3, 4 years of review. Ellis, you should be a supervisor. Well, parents have that same goal, right? Since you're born to whenever you become an adult, they're trying to prepare you for that next phase of life. But sadly, the instructions through love aren't always received as training, right? That's the unfortunate part, because when we discount that training, then it starts to become us versus them, right? And that's where the friction comes in. Now, you can make the same correlation between you and God. God is really training you to live a life of the design he made for you and to prepare you for eternal life. So if we're combative against God's commands and instructions, how could we live to our design according to what Ecclesiastes says, the purpose of man, like why we were designed? And how are we ever going to get to the goal of living with God if we can't do those things which he asked here, right? It's a training, right? Life, physical life is just a passageway training to get to the next stage of life, right? So it's very similar, the parallel between man and God's relationship in the family dynamics in the household. But that's what we want to keep our minds wrapped around this morning, is thinking about it as less as do's and don'ts, rules and regulations, and more as training, right? And we'll open up to comments and questions after this statement. Just like God is already where he is. Remember last week we talked about God used to come to the Garden of Eden, then he will go back to wherever God was residing. Parents, when they have children at any age, I don't care if they had children at 15, 13, 12, they're already ahead of the generation in which they produce, logically, right? Age-wise. So therefore, just like God is already ahead, those instructions and training aspects that they're giving is really for whose benefit? Let's think of it from God's point of view. God's instructions to everyone from Adam and Eve down onto us is really for whose benefit? Us or God? It's really for us, because there are certain aspects of instructions that are really for our own good in this physical life, even before we get to the spiritual world, right? Even before we cross over, it's that aspect is there. So same thing with parents, right? Keep that in mind, that in the guise of class, the structure of class from last week to this week, whether you're talking about the relationship from us to God or for child and parent relationship of any age, those instructional aspects primarily are for the benefit of you. Now, when God came back and forth to the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve were doing those things that were conducive to his will, it was also building the harmony of the family, because they were a family. God, Adam, and Eve were a family. Just like in a physical household, when the individuals of the household do those things in which the parents have set forth, it also builds harmony for the family, right? But just like God could go back to where he was from apart from Adam and Eve, adults in the house have that at their disposal at any time. Now, some states don't allow you to move forward with that time period, right? Some states, you can't just say at 18, your child have to move out, right? Some states equate the child living in your home the same as a renter situation, right? Like some states don't allow you to put your child out. You'd have to almost start an eviction process that will take some time. Other states don't have that. Other states, if you're a parent and you say, listen, my child's not doing what he or she's supposed to do, I'm changing the locks. Other states will say that's perfectly fine, right? So some of these things we're talking about in terms of application is different even under man's law, meaning Some people look at it a different way outside of God, just man's law from state to state and definitely from country to country. Some countries, you don't move out of your family's house until you get married, right? Some countries have that construct. Some countries, the parents set forth even an occupation for the child. A lot of times, if you're in a country that's based off of a caste system, whatever your parents did, you have a straight pathway to do and replicate that same job in terms of your last name or your caste, right? So society interacts with these sort of training things different, right? But as an overall arch from last week to this week, what we see from Proverbs, when we talk about how you are measured, it seems to be that this is not far-fetched, that outside of even God's viewpoint on things, humanity and societies all over the world judge human beings based off of their actions and their work. So it's only right it trickles down to the children, right? And that's our question was specifically for children. As a child known by his or her actions or deeds according to Proverbs, right? Okay, Brother Stanley, you had your hand, correct?
Yes. On question 4 and 5, I can only think back to Cain. Cain felt that his past would be unfair, so God marked him because he said every time someone see me, they would murder me, they would kill me. I couldn't live in society. My punishment is too harsh for me to bear. So in his perspective, if he's judged by what he did, he can't function in society.
So let's look at that, because actually I meant to read that because we were referencing that last worship service, which was great. Let's quickly go to Genesis 4. Genesis 4, we won't read all of this. There's some old English vernacular in here that I think is interesting. Verse 9 is the most famous. Where is Abel, your brother? The Lord said. He said, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? God said, what have you done? Verse 11 is this curse that Brother Stanley is referring to. So now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you will till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you, a fugitive and a vagabond. That's an old vernacular. You got to go to grandmothers and back. But grandmothers used to call people vagabonds, right? Old vernacular there. You shall be on the earth. King said, to his point, my punishment is greater than I could bear. What about what Abel was able to bear? Anybody have any feelings towards Abel? Seems like Cain is not thinking about that. Surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth, and it will happen that anyone who finds me will what? Kill me. Now, we don't have time, obviously, last week in the sermon or today, but this is kind of amazing because Cain killed someone. Why would other people see this curse, equate that to a punishment God gave Cain? How would they even know about that? And they desire to kill Cain. See what we're saying? There are no laws set up yet. There is no Moses. Why would some other created human being see Cain, even know what that mark represented, and say, oh, that's Cain? That mark is he killed his brother? We now need to kill Cain. See what I'm asking? Because that's a whole nother Bible study, right? Why would another created being see Cain, see the mark, equate the mark to the curse, and desire to kill him before there's even a thou shalt not kill, before there's even an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth? These sound like some natural laws, and it sounds much like a physical family structure, meaning something happened between siblings and the parent, and another sibling sees and wants to react as well. That's what it sounds like, because all of these beings are just created children of God, right? All of them are under God. So Cain's response is, if you don't protect me, this curse is going to cause me to lose my life, and not at your hands, but at the hands of someone else, another quote unquote Abel, another quote unquote Cain. And the Lord said to him, therefore, whoever kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him. How much? Sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark on Cain, lest anyone finding him should kill him. Right? It sounds like that this aspect of violence that Cain introduced was out of his grasp, meaning he put something in motion that he couldn't reel back. And now God had to intervene between mankind and mankind. And now we get all the way to 2021, right? Violence begets violence is what we're saying here. So this is all the way at the beginning. Cain's reputation and his lineage reputation was based off of the actions in which the world at that time knew he was a part of. Our question is asking, is that a fair measurement, right? Is it fair that Cain was judged based off of what he did to his brother Abel, right? If we're team Abel, yes, it's fair, right? Because it doesn't matter if it's 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 100 years from now, if we're team Abel, we're saying, yes, it's fair. If we're team Cain, after amount of time goes by, what are we looking for? Forgiveness, mercy, grace, right? We're looking for, hey, that was a long time ago, or I'm a different person. But if we look at it from the guise of the victim, that person don't care how much time has gone by. So that's why I love the compare and contrast between the new covenant and the law. When we talk about eye for eye, tooth and a tooth, I can't remember if it was Wednesday's class or last week's class, we were looking at this concept. It's going to be hard for humanity to evoke justice or even vengeance. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord, because the earth swallowed up Abel's blood. The earth, the created thing. So God's memory is very, very long. Contrast that to Revelations. The earth is where the blood of the Christians that were killed for God's name was crying out. The earth. So God is saying, I'm the only one who can apply vengeance, because whatever you do as mankind to mankind is limited to this realm. In the next realm, think about this for a second. You have no power over one another. You cannot kill one another in the next realm. Right? You can't put forth your own justice in eternal life in heaven or hell. So God is saying you're limited by time. Abel's time has expired. So Cain is still living. How are we going to evoke proper justice? Mankind was saying, hey, we're going to kill Cain. And that's how we're going to do it. God is saying, no, you're not. If you kill Cain, then I'm going to have vengeance on you sevenfold. Well, that's not fair. He killed Abel. I have to deal with that because what? I'm the parent. That's why I said it's much like a physical house, right? You can't have siblings disciplining siblings, right? Parent got to step in and say, I'm the parent. Usually when you have some siblings, usually it's the older, you see this in little kids. If the parent was to leave, just turn the camera on or go in another room, that sibling will start sounding just like the parent. Right? They do studies like this with kids all the time, like almost verbatim, right? It's just how things are working. God is saying to the other human beings at this time, don't start trying to discipline Cain by the way you think I would or you feel he should be disciplined. He has to exist as an example. This mark was an example that he did what he did, but also don't try to evoke your level of justice on him, right? This is an interesting concept. That's a deviation from the class, but it's worth studying because that level of dynamic between God, the creator, and the created, we don't spend that much time on because we get to Noah so quick. But there were people before Noah and before the people of the flood that it seemed like they had some level of interaction with God, because it seemed like they were trying to avenge Abel. Don't seem like they were trying to kill Cain for some malicious reason. It sounds like they have a very valid reason. That's the guy who killed Abel. Why would they be so upset over that? They're not related to Abel. Seems like people had a different level of connection between God, the creator, and each other than today. But this aspect is true. From Cain to now, you are going to have aspects of your character assessed by people around you based off of whatever you said and whatever you did in the past, right? There is no way to get around that, unfortunately. Now, Some things that we've done in the past, we have moved past and we have moved on, but other people haven't. And there's an aspect that we need to accept. Some things you do, you may be sorrowful for and repentful for. But Paul could not be surprised if after 20 years, some people didn't receive him. He shouldn't feel no way about that because he used to have people killed. Whatever Paul repented of, that's between Paul and his God. But some people may say, I'm not there yet to forgive you. He can't feel no way about that. It's on that person to work on that forgiveness, yes, but he can't be surprised. Man, all these letters I wrote, people still upset I had their dad killed. Well, yeah, bro, I am. I do still feel some way about that. David can't be, of all these good Psalms I wrote, all this repentable. What about Uriah's cousin, brothers? Somebody may still feel some way, right? Because these things were against other people, right? So we have to look at it from the guise of interaction with humanity. That's why this question is asking, is it a fair measurement? Because it's assessing the growth. But some things we do in life, parents try to tell children this all the time. Some things you do in life will stick with you for the rest of your life, even if you have moved past it. And if you have moved past it, that's a blessing. We can't minimize that at all. Somebody who has done something, this happens a lot, even in our criminal justice system. Somebody can be on death row for a heinous crime. And people can say, listen, I don't know the intention of this person's heart, but this person do seem remorseful. People can see that person and say, yes, this person seemed like if they could go back, they would not do what they did. But in some states, let's put God's law to the side. In some states, is that enough? No, some states say, even if you're remorseful, no parole. Even if you're remorseful, death row is still proceeding. Some states don't have that. Some states feel if you are remorseful, you can re-enter society. So again, even man's law views this in different ways. But people still will recognize in this country and even greater in other countries, Middle East for sure, some Middle Eastern cultures will, just like Cain, do something to you physically so that people will see you and know what you did. They do something to you, cut your hand off, cut your tongue out. So, oh, goodness. Because they want people to see you and say, everyone who does what Ellis did, this is what happens to them. Right? So this is a mixture of God's law and natural law. Now, if we look at this from a child to parent interaction, this is another reason why children have to look at rules and instructions differently. A parent is trying to assist a child not to stay in one realm, but to go out into an uncontrolled realm. So in this house, there may be love, grace, forgiveness. But when you go out into the world, there may be none. So if you keep on a trajectory of doing what you want to do, once you leave the structure of this house, you're going to be like a king where other people are going to want to evoke their own judgment, vengeance. And now we have a problem because me as the parent, I have no control over that other realm, right? Outside the door, right? A parent have no control. Parent barely have control over inside the door. So therefore, some of those instructions are to help because you have to navigate through life. Cain, it sounds like his relationship with God is changed. Because see how Cain is saying, now I have to go out away from your face. You now in the world now. And in the world, they're not going to be understanding the way you want me to be understanding. They're going to want to do things to you based off of the world's level of justice and vengeance. And this is some of those things in which even some of the simplest rules that are in a house are to help the child navigate to not only just their own house in the future, but into the world, the house of the world, because the parent knows there are some natural laws in this world. And some of those natural laws are not going to change. The parent know that within the next one generation. Now, some natural laws over time do change, depending on what society that you're in. Some don't, though. So the parent is not only trying to instruct the child for harmony in the house, not only to instruct the child so that the parent can know the child will become an adult in themselves, but also to assist his and her to navigate through the natural order of things. That is lost in many households, and is not lost by the parents. It's lost mostly by the children, because the appreciation isn't always there that somebody take their time to give forth some rules and regulation to assist me to navigate my own life. Right? Like, God is taking the time to help Cain navigate through his own dark future. God could have been like, too bad for you, but he still took the time. God took the time to help Adam and Eve navigate through their own future that would be dark. By what? He clothed them. He helped them. He could have said no. So even in wrongdoing, a lot of times in anger, children don't give the parent the credit for still giving forth some blessing to be received, even in discipline, right? Because the parent knows the world gonna judge you. Even if the parent forgive you, love you, and moved on, even if you have moved on, the parent knows some things you do in this life outside of God's holy word, some things you do in this life will stick with you for forever. Society will step in between the parent and the child, correct? And say, we hear what the mom is saying, we hear what the dad is saying, but we don't believe that. We are evoking this as a permanent or a long-term mark on this person. So the parent, before we do certain things, try to give us those instructions like, don't do it. Because once you do it, some of these things is going to be hard to pull back, right? That's what we're talking about today, Brother Stan. Yes.
Well, and it, unfortunately, I mean, in some instances, we do have character assessments. So people assess what you have done in every realm of your past, so they'll know whether you're the right fit for their company, for that position. And they do that if you're there, like you alluded to earlier. You can be with a company for 10 years and they're deciding to move you up to management. They look at your attendance, they look at your interaction with your supervisor, all these things to see if you fit that particular job title that they're getting ready to move you in. Same thing with relationships, which we don't pay attention to. You should characterize and assess the person that you met. You should know what they did, what they're doing, what their temperament is, all these kinds of things, so you know what you're getting yourself into. People talk a very good game when they first meet you, but you need to know a lot about folks' past and what they've done and how they interact with different things and under stress. Unfortunately, for people who don't like to do that, that's the way of the world. And it does save a lot of time, heartache, and management of some things, or mismanagement of some things.
Yeah, work, it definitely you feel some way. Anybody been in a position where they hire outside of the organization for upper management and you feel some way? I mean, you'd be like, oh, okay, nice to meet you. And you know, when they be doing the icebreaker, everyone go around, say what you do. Hey, I'm Ellis. Yeah, nice to meet you. But how you feeling inside? Man, I feel some way. Because you feel like, why you hire outside of the org? Why didn't you elevate someone? And then what if they said, oh, because this person's late, this person doesn't work well with others, this person, and start assessing the things that those of us who've been in the organization do and don't do. I had to go outside of the organization to bring somebody inside because I couldn't find nobody qualified inside. Oh, God had to say amongst himself, I have to send my own self because I can't find nobody qualified from inside humanity to fix this. Oh, nobody? No one could see what we're saying. So these things are a replication of what we know from spiritually to be true. Sometimes that is the case where that assessment, we fail. That's why we say, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. There's many blessings that we miss because we weren't ready to receive that blessing. That happened in the workforce all the time, all the time. And adults try to give children instructions to help prepare them, right? High school is that way. Adults know whether he or she have went to college or not. They know it's going to be hard. If you can start the first day of freshman year and focus for 4 years on your goal, which is the next stage of life, the parent know on graduation, you'll be prepared. Kids hear that, receive that, and start doing their own thing about sophomore year. And what do the parents say? If you just keep, even you lost a year, if you stay focused sophomore year, what happens? Before you know it, it's senior year. You prepare for school? No, you scrambling, trying to do SAT prep, trying to do what the parents saying. If you would have been doing SAT prep since freshman year, but instead you said, what? I'm just a freshman. Don't put off tomorrow what could be done today. If every person in high school, since the first day, focused on graduation, since the first day, and every single day they work towards that goal, oh my goodness. Every person, it wouldn't matter necessarily what school you went to, right? Because you could go to a bad school academically and people say, this rose grew up from the concrete. How she excelled? Because she wasn't concerned with her curriculum, her teachers, her environment. She had a focus on graduation. She said, I'm getting out this school. So that girl worked towards a future, right? There was a great documentary that was with Michelle Obama. She was meeting with some young girls that was in similar situations. This one girl was focused, and Michelle Obama was like, I'm happy to meet you. And the girl in tears saying, I'm here to meet you. But Michelle Obama is like, but you are the example though. Like, look at what you have been able to do, even with your circumstances. But she didn't think of it that way. Oh, Michelle Obama was like, you are an example because other people going to see you, not me, and be relatable and say, oh, if that girl can do that, I can do it. But you got to have a focus because a parent knows what is against every child: time. If you had unlimited time, I guarantee you parents would not be on you the same way, because parents would know, well, you'll find your way. But we don't have unlimited time. We don't have time to waste. So a parent is trying to help us move through life with less friction that they have. And think of these examples of Adam and Eve, Cain, Abel, and Seth. Think of Noah, think of Abraham, think of David instructing his son Solomon. I'm trying to help you, Solomon, to navigate through life with less friction than me. Because if I wrote in Psalms that in sin I was conceived, God only knows what you could write, because we know how you was conceived. I'm trying to help you navigate through life with less friction. So you need to focus on the principal thing: wisdom and understanding, not these other things. Because when I took my eyes off of those two things, I became lost. And I don't want you to follow in my same footsteps, right? Solomon heard those things, asked for wisdom, received understanding. God gave some instructions. And then after some time, Solomon started to substitute what God wanted him to do for what he wanted to do. And what was the outcome of that? When he became older, what his point was? This was all what? Meaningless. Because I went through this and I went through that. I went after money, I went after fame, and I realized there's a time and a place for everything. But that sounds like who? Speaking like that in Ecclesiastes sounds like who? Parents and grandparents. That sounds like something a grandparent would say. Hey man, it's a time for fun and a time to be focused. That's what Solomon is writing. If I would have realized there was a time for games and a time for seriousness at a young age, what kind of older Solomon would I have been? That's what older people try to prevent. The woulda, coulda, shoulda. Where would my life be today if I would have went down this path instead of that path? So this aspect of questions 4 and 5 the measurement that we have, and this principle set forth by Christ is something that young people would do themselves a great service. Ecclesiastes says, remember God when? In your youth. If you build a foundation as a young person, it's easier to build on top of that. But if your foundation is rocky or shifting, as life comes, and no doubt there will be trials and tribulations because we all will face it, without the strong base, adults know what? The likelihood of your success is lower because life is going to blow hard and you have nothing to root you into the ground. Christ's principles are the exact same way, right? This passage here in Matthew chapter 7, you will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? In Matthew 7, verse 20, therefore by their fruits you will know them, right? The fruit is just visual. A tree grows and a tree has leaves and branches. And I'm not somebody who can tell by the bark, by the leaf, what the tree is. I'm just a regular person. I'm not a gardener. But when I see the fruit, even I know what a peach look like, or an apple look like, or what grapes on a vine look like. So I'll say, what? That's a peach tree. Even I don't know anything about gardening. Someone say, Ellis, what's that? That's a lemon tree. How you know? The bark? I don't know nothing about the bark. What about the leaf? I don't know leaves. What am I? I just know that's a yellow lemon. How you know that's a lemon? Because I know what lemons look like. So even a regular person can judge that tree from a distance and know what? That's a lemon tree. That's what Jesus, even a regular person, before we get to me, right? 1 Corinthians say, what about if judging? If you judge yourself, before we get to me, Jesus is saying, can't just regular people tell what type of person you are based off of your presentation. Just regular people, he's saying, not even me. Regular people can say, that's a peach tree, that's an apple tree, that's a lemon tree. Ooh, what are those, grapes? Oh, that's a vine, that's grapes. How you know that's grapes? Look, I know what grapes are. I've been in a grocery store before. Regular people will judge you by your fruit. So when we mirror Matthew with Proverbs and these instructions, we see, oh, wait a minute. Some of these instructions that are coming from Proverbs lead us to be an adult. And Jesus is talking to an adult audience that may or may not have the instructions in their home as Proverbs. And he's saying the similar things from Proverbs that we have to be mindful of how we live, because even before we get to the next life, people will judge you how you live in this life. This is just practical teaching. Before we even get to spirituality, people will judge you in this world by what you say and by what you do. And that's what Jesus is coming, tying these two things together. Okay, Brother Kurt, you have your hand?
Yeah. I was studying some of this over the week, and I think about like a lot of the siblings or parental to child relationships that we talk about. We're talking about Cain and Abel, or Jacob and Esau, David and Solomon. I feel like what these things boil down to are choices, right? Regardless of how much a parent does, and I'm talking as a parent and a child, right? Within a place where I have a 5-year-old that I'm trying to grow and nurture, but also have a lens of my mom who instilled and poured so much into me, and understanding that there are things that I did and choices that I made in life that were my choices, that regardless of what my mom said, my mom used to tell me things. She's like, things like what you're saying, like, what you do now is gonna judge you 20 years from now. And I'd be like, whatever. But now I'm like, wow, what she said 20 years ago is correct, right? And then, but there got to a point where my mom had to make me make my choices because it was my life. You know what I'm saying? And I think sometimes now as a parent, I'm looking at my child and I'm like, wow, there's gonna come a point where regardless of what I tell my child, what I teach my child, what I pour into my child, he's going to make his own choices, right? And there's nothing that I can do about that because it's his life. And that's a hard pill to swallow, you know what I mean? Because you invest so much into a child, you put so much into a person. And that person's gonna come to a point one day when they're gonna be like, I don't care what your opinion is. You know what I mean? And I have to accept that now. You know what I'm saying? I have to accept that now. So when he does start to do that, I understand that he's making his choices just like I did, right? And again, scripture, Cain made his choice, right? Solomon made his choice in spite of the instruction of the greatest king of Israel, his father. He made his choices. And that's why ultimately our children are the Lord's, because our children are going to disappoint us at some point in life. You know what I mean? And how we handle that disappointment is what really creates and strengthens the relationship, parental relationship in life. See, because my mom and I are at a place in life, in spite of many frictions of the choices that I made, but after she stopped trying to micromanage my choices and believed in who she raised me to be, now we've gotten to a place where she respects and knows who I am because she's who raised me. You know what I mean? So you look at it, it's all throughout the scripture, and I think especially through the prodigal son. That son made his choice. But ultimately, because of what he was raised, he made a choice to return. Now, that choice had consequences when he came back, right? But he was able to come back and be embraced by, his father and his parents. So, I think ultimately we're all somebody's child.
Yeah, everyone.
You know what I'm saying? We're all somebody's child. And at some point, we've disappointed our parents some place in life. And it's because of the choices we make. And that's the beauty of free will that the Lord gives us.
Yeah, I think if I had to put one word to that comment, is balance, right? Because we can't say, oh, this lesson not for me, right? Because the last part of what he just said, even if I was thinking that the whole time, oh, that nullifies it, right? And the concept of the prodigal son is a great example, right? Because the prodigal son made a choice and the father let him go, right? They left. And he lived his life. I don't know how long. Parable don't start quantifying time. And the kid got to his lowest point. And then one day he thought to himself, oh, wait a minute, even a servant in my dad's house lived better than this. I'm going back. And he noticed when he cracked the horizon that his dad was waiting. If my dad was waiting for me when I came back, what would that immediately imply? That he'd been waiting there because he don't know what day I'm going to come back. So to me, that would have broke my heart. Then I'm thinking, what if I had been gone a year? I had my dad out here waiting a whole year for me to get back. See, when you start talking about children, especially children who have them instructions, like Brother Chris said, oh, I could remember those instructions, right? The kid needs to feel that. I say that all the time from a child's point of view. The kid heart needs to be broken. Some of these kids today have every blessing in God's known world. It's some kids that would wish to trade places with you and your nagging mom or nagging dad, won't let you have Instagram this. And they wish they could have that. That's called a blessing. Somebody who care about your well-being is a blessing. And some people say, look, my mom taught me that. I can't lie to y'all and say my mom or dad didn't teach me that. And somebody say, well, Ellis, why you act like that? Well, to be honest, I wanted to do that. Well, what about the instruction? Well, I mean, in one ear, out the other. What do it mean if it go in one ear, out the other? What's not in between the two ears? Because nothing caught that. Nothing caught it. So it just went through. So somebody tried to ask Ellis, why did you do that? And all I can say is that was my choice. Why did the prodigal son leave? I just made a choice. And therefore, when you made that choice and the consequence was there, did you think about how your parent was receiving that choice? That's what I'm saying. That story, when I see that, I think of me, and if I crack the horizon, I gotta think, I have my dad out here waiting 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 10 months, right? Because that, if I see my dad, that means he been waiting. So I wasted his time too. And that should be contrite heart. That's why certain things, kids have to move past this, oh, woe is me, right? Today is a good example, right? Today in this part of the world, we look at it as Mother's Day. I don't care if you don't have a good relationship with your mom. That's irrelevant. You still owe your mom because your mom gave you what? Life. I don't care if you don't have a good relationship with your dad. You still owe your dad because your dad gave you what? Life. It's just the hard truth. And when you become an adult or a mom or a dad, especially when you start assessing DNA, you start thinking certain things. Man, I'm not ever going to tell my dad this, but I kind of see why he was the way he was. You know why? Because I'm that way now. So now you justify, I got to see why my mom was the way she was, because you start assessing things like he was saying, now I'm in a different role. Now I'm two roles, the child and the father. So now I got to think about me, my own self. Imagine a prodigal son. What about if his son want his inheritance? What he going to say? You know this guy named Jesus? He told about me. This sounds like deja vu. And even if he told his kid that, what could the kid do with free will? Man, I'm gonna try it anyway. But you know this story. Yeah, but I still want to leave. That's every generation. So yes, I agree with that. There's some things you do, some truth you give, some instructions you give. Your child may do his or her own thing. I'm not saying don't feel bad about that because you're a parent, right? So we're not minimizing that. That brother comment not minimizing that. What it is looking at it from a different point of view to say, let's put some onus on children. And praise God, especially kids who grew up in a church home. Let me just end with this. You don't have a grievance in God's whole earth. If you had access to this your whole life, even if your parents weren't perfect, what are you talking about? It's kids kids read one Bible verse, be like, I wish somebody took me to Sunday school. It's adults that say that. I wish somebody forced me to go. It's people who see your life and assess it and say, I would give everything to trade. What are you complaining about? And we be like, no, you don't understand. Like, I got another brother and they be micromanaging me and talking about this business. I want to go live my own life. We would have been like, what is the prodigal son talking about? It sounded like his house was what? Rich. What are you complaining about? My dad always making me wake up. I got to till the ground, this, that. What's the problem? See, we can always look at it from the guise of someone else's point of view. And when we make that choice, that young man woke up one day, we don't know how long, and he looked at it from someone else's point of view, from a servant. He said, wait a minute, even servants live better than this. I'm going to go back humbly and ask my dad, don't receive me as a son, just receive me as a servant. And the dad's love was so great, he didn't even get his story out, right? He had a plan when he was walking to his dad to say, listen, just receive me on the lowest level. But the dad received him how? Hey, let's get a party together. Let's put a ring. The son came back. That's the love that is discounted in arguing. It's discounted in family fighting. People don't equate that love, how difficult that brother is saying. The child not thinking about that. The child thinking how difficult it is for his or her. So for us, when we have studies like this, let's make it personal, but not always against how we were raised, right? There's a time and a place for that because we already admitted there's no one perfect. But sometimes we got to think of our own self and think of ourselves as Solomon. Yes, David wasn't a perfect father. We know that. But Solomon made his own choice. Sounds like Solomon has some good instructions. But he made his own choice. Therefore, Solomon have to live with the choices that he made. And those examples the brother was mentioned from the Bible, if we had time, we could go piece by piece. Be like, yep, she made her own choice there. He made his own choice there. And they have to live with those consequences. And praise God. And a lot of those examples, they came back. A lot of those examples, God gave them the time to come back. So when we're looking at these things today, right, look at this more so just as a continuation, obviously, from last week. But as we keep moving through the next several weeks, make sure you look at it from, like I said, if I had to pick one word from that, is balance. Look at it from a balance. You as a child, you as an adult. Your responsibility as a child, those who are above you, their responsibility to you in proper teaching, those things which they did well, those things in which they didn't do well, right? What are some areas of improvement for your household? Now you think of yourself as an adult, right? What are those things I'm doing well? What are those things I'm not doing well? The same way you wish your parents would have had some assessment, start assessing yourself and try to create a harmony balance, right? If we can get to that place, now we're living in that Corinthians verse of we don't need someone to judge us because we're judging ourselves. All right, we're over time. Next week, we're going to jump right into chapter 1. We're just going to read 7 through 10. We're not going to go outside of that. But if you're joining us on YouTube, we're thankful to have you. We're going to disconnect right now and switch over to our live stream. So we much appreciate your attendance. And if you're here with us this morning, we're thankful to have you.